Welcome to the Binge Breakers podcast. I'm Jacqueline. I am here to teach you how I overcame bulimia and my binge eating disorder, and how you can too. Through simple steps of mind management, repairing your relationship with yourself, understanding your habits, and intuitive eating.
Disclaimer: this recording is not intended to be utilized as medical advice or a medical diagnosis. If you think you're in need of medical attention or treatment, please seek it immediately. This recording will also contain sensitive subjects such as binging and purging, weight, and depression. Please listen at your own discretion and do what you think is best for you.
Yeah. I know that you're supposed to keep your sleeping schedule. Like, supposedly you're not supposed to sleep in. You're supposed to keep it the same schedule. But I never have any issues falling asleep. So I always just, if I can sleep in, allow myself to do it. I don't know.
I think that's fine. I think there are so many rules, aren't there, about these things, but I think if you actually take it on a day-by-day basis and listen to your body, then that's a much more intuitive way of doing it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's jumping right into it. That's why I wanted to have you on, because you talk about a lot of healthful nutritional things, fitness things, but you're also very intuitive, it seems. Like, you incorporate a lot of mindfulness and listening to your body, and here's what research says, but also here's some practical things to think about and listening to yourself. So I appreciate that about your method and what you put on Instagram.
Yeah, I think that's just come from years of trials and tribulations, years of testing. And I think the more there are so many external measures, aren't there, for health and sleep and wellness and all the rest of it, we become so disconnected then actually from what our bodies are actually telling us. And I think over time, it's probably better to develop more of an internal sense of whether you're hungry or satisfied, or whether you're tired or not tired, or whether you're up for an intense workout or not, rather than having to rely on a sleep tracker to tell you whether you've slept poorly, or your HRV reading to tell you whether you shouldn't go hard at the gym today because your HRV is low as well. Why can't I kind of depict the necessary intensity for myself?
Well, what do you think the appeal is there? Because I get tempted by it too. It's like, oh, you get to, do you think people just like to know the numbers and that makes them feel better? Or
yeah, I think they're massive safety behaviors, to be honest.
Okay.
I think it's bred from it's bred from the perception that there is a perfect way to do everything. And that it can't be truer in nutrition than it can be for anything else, is that everyone's so worried about the perfect way to eat. And I think that's because of all of the different diets out there and all of the mixed messages from the kind of diet community, diet mentality, food police, that everyone's like, well, I don't know what I should be eating and when, so I just need something or someone to tell me what that is. And it just is a safety behavior to feel like you're doing the right thing because you're worried it won't be the right thing. And in the world we live in, because we're all so busy, and we've got so many distractions, your phone is a distraction, the TV is a distraction, everything is a distraction. Nobody's checked into how they're feeling at all.
No. And you can go days and days and months and years without ever checking in with yourself, really. You can keep on going. And then I feel like the only time people really check in with themselves when they're going like that is when they have a massive health problem. Or something like that, and their body's like, you need to stop, or we're gonna make you stop. And that's when they start checking in a little bit more.
Yeah, it's like your body's like, you need to slow down or we will slow you down.
Yes.
And it's obvious. I work with so many people who have disordered eating habits for one reason or another, and a big reason around stress eating or stress drinking is that inability to slow down, and that inability to recognize and then handle stress. You'll talk to these clients who are very clearly quite stressed in a number of ways, and how do you feel in terms of your sort of stress these days? Oh yeah, fine, everything's fine. I mean, that's the British answer for everything. But
yes, yeah, it is.
We're
America's
all fine.
I'm good, everything's good, and we say fine a lot too.
Yeah, it's like no one. I think in America, a lot more people have therapists and talk about their feelings a bit more than in England. But yeah, the standard answer's fine. But actually, it's because we're so wired. I think we just have no idea how our bodies feel at all until we start to practice checking in and slowing down.
Yeah,
Because even when you have a spare 5 minutes, it's like, oh, I'll check my phone. What's on
right.
Facebook? What's on Instagram? What's on TikTok? It's not a
It's
case
so
of,
tempting. Like
yeah,
it's just right there. And whatever. And for us too, our work is on Instagram half the time and whatever
yeah,
social media. And so you can go on there for one thing and then you're like suddenly looking at cat videos. How did I get here?
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Um,
I came on here to engage and with like with with similar accounts, and now I'm like down this TikTok funnel that I never knew existed.
right. Yeah. But okay, so one thing I first want to ask you, you how you help people who are struggling with stress when they just say they're fine and they don't check in themselves. But you
Mhm.
also reminded me real quick, personal story. When I spent a year in Manchester when I was in school. And
Cool.
so I'll never forget when I went to England, and in America, it's how are you? And in England, they say that too. But in England, it's much more common for people to say, like, you all right? And so,
Yeah.
and if you say that to someone in America, they're like, what? I'm fine. What do you, is there something wrong with me? And so whenever I went to England and people are like, you all right? It took me a minute. I'd be like, yes, I'm fine. And then, but they say it the same way we say, how are you? It's like a greeting. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything, whatever. But it was just like a double take for so long when I went
Yes.
there. So funny.
Yeah. There's a really great I'll get onto the answer to your question about helping people with stress, but there's a really great meme about like how guys interact with each other, and it's like one nod is like look over there and another nod's like, oh, check that out, and the up nod is you all right, and the down nod's like, hello mate, how you doing? And yeah, like the answer to you all right is just you all right. It's just back. It's like a
It's the
greeting.
same,
As
exact same
it's
back.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not an actual question of how are you doing, which it is interesting. Different colloquialisms, isn't it?
One time I
um
answered someone and they were like, I did not care why. I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
need an answer. And I was like, oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Mhm.
um I mean, with stress, it is difficult if someone can be quite non checked in, and also as a coach, you're only taking a guess at that reflection to ask whether that's something, if they're talking to you about a disordered eating practice or a certain habit of snacking or things like that, you might then I might lead in with a reflection or a leading question as how are you doing, how are you feeling in terms of, do you feel stressed from work or whatever, and they might be like, no, I feel fine. And in the back of your head you're thinking, based on, you're probably relating your own data as well as other clients' data, to think it probably sounds like it's a stress snack. But what I
Mhm.
do then is rather than push that and say like, no, you definitely are, I don't want to invalidate their experience.
Yeah.
It's
You
very
don't want
much
to
a
tell
case,
them what they think they know.
not at all. And actually, maybe it's not particularly that they're doing it because they're stressed, but there may have been a situation in that day that triggered
Mhm.
maybe a certain emotion that then caused that snack. So we do something called the break the chain exercise, where it's recognizing that this habit or this pattern of eating that they're not a fan of and are looking to change is the last link in a very long chain. And that
Mhm.
chain could have begun earlier that day, it could have begun the day before, or maybe even a couple of days before. And it's looking at what's happened over these few days that may have been out of the ordinary or triggering emotionally in some way, or maybe even it was just undereating or restriction or something like that
Yeah.
that then led to this event. And so it's just asking open-ended questions of, how have things been the last few days? Is there anything out of the ordinary? Talk to me about things at home or at work, or all of these different things. And you then get to a case of a client over time will become much more in tune with how they're feeling on a day to day. And then the light bulb might switch of like, oh yeah, I don't actually take that much time to slow down and spend quality me time, because I'm so busy at work or looking after the kids or with my partner or doing all of these other things. I don't actually ever take any time for me. And that's
Mhm.
like when the light bulb clicks that there might be something awry there with self-care they want to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the break the chain example, because people will so often they'll have those series of maybe it's like a binge, maybe it's overeating, whatever. And they feel like partly they're in it. So you as a coach, you have the benefit of like looking on the outside and diagnosing things. But secondly, they're just like there and it feels chaotic and they don't know how they got there and they don't realize it could have been a series of things. It usually isn't just one decision or one event. It's like a lead up of so many different things that combine into that. And I think something poor people that are going through this, they aren't looking at every single thing that's going on. And when you lay it out for them, I think it'd be really comforting that it's like, no, you're not just a chaotic mess. You're not just like this person who has no control over food. There's a lot of reasons why you're doing this. It isn't just because you're broken. So I like that example for that reason as well.
Yeah, that's a really great point, isn't it? Because when people can almost internalize their feelings or their identities, can't they? Like, oh, I am an anxious person, or I am a binge eater, and they almost tie themselves into that identity, which almost makes them feel like no matter what I do, I can't ever change this aspect of myself. It's almost like bred within them. Or as you mentioned, they might feel quite low in confidence or ability because it's something that's happened repeatedly that they're struggling to change, and being able to say this, you need to be more self-compassionate. It's normal to struggle with these kind of issues, and so many people do, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you or that you're not fixable, and you're, as you said, you're not broken. It's just a case of we need to dig deeper into all of these complex things that are going on psychologically, behaviorally. All of these things have led to this safety behavior that you're using, because that's what disordered eating habits are. They are safety behaviors that do solve a problem for the individual. We just need to work out what that problem is, like what's that trying to solve, and how can we then work on that in maybe a more constructive way that suits this person's values and their goals.
Yeah, that is key. It is absolutely solving a problem. It's just maybe not solving it the way you want to solve it for the rest of your life, but it is serving a function. And I think when you can see that very clearly, it helps take the blame off. It helps your understanding, all that sort of stuff. So glad that you said that as well. So switching gears here, first of all, I just kind of threw you into the podcast, but everyone listening,
it's great.
Jonny Landels, he's from Next Stop Nutrition, and I brought him on the podcast for all the beautiful things that he just said. But I wanted to ask you, I'll save it till the end about like, I kind of wanted to ask you about your fitness journey, but I'm very curious about how do you help clients? Like you obviously work with clients to work on their fitness and their health and nutrition goals, right? But how do you help them do that in a non-disordered way? Where do you draw the line?
I think I'm very clear with my messaging, both sort of pre and during client relationships, about their mentality and their mindset around our work together, because I'm not completely anti diet in the terms that I'm not like anti weight loss. I'm not anti weight loss for any reason, but I'm very much anti diet mentality. I'm very much against the diet mentality with the intuitive eating sort of perspective of the diet mentality, that all diets are focused on restriction, they're focused on rigid rules, they're focused on external control, they're focused on all these things that eventually work against a person, their relationship with food and their body. Their body will rebel eventually, that they will delve into overeating or snacking or all these things. And it's like you said, these people come to me almost feeling like they're out of control with food, or that they're broken in some reason. They don't understand why they can't get a grip on these things. They're usually quite educated, well-read. They understand nutrition. It's not like they lack the knowledge of what foods they want to eat more of. It's just the fact that they feel like they've got no willpower or no motivation and don't understand why. And so I'm very much a case of, look, I'm all for it if you want to lose body fat. And I do a like a 5 whys exercise and a very deep consultation over how people rate their health and fitness and their eating habits, and how actively that they would like to see these things changing, so that we start talking about internal motivators and also start talking about action steps, rather than just like, oh, I want to lose 5 pounds because I feel like I'd look better. It's like we go deeper than that. And then with these people,
pause you real quick, because I think this is an important topic. With weight loss, I'm not anti-weight loss either, but I never tell people, I work with people specifically who are trying to recover from bulimia. And so I never tell them, weight loss should be combined with that. It could accidentally happen, but you don't want
Mhm.
to combine them. When do you feel like it's like when clients tell you like I just want to look better, and like do you think that's a good enough reason to lose weight? I guess is my question.
Not in and of itself, no. And that's
Okay.
why I would go into that 5 why exercise to be
Hmm.
like, okay, well, why is looking better important to you? And they might say, oh, because uh I was this weight when I was this age or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, why do you want to get back there? What's with
Hmm.
that image in your head? Because it usually boils down to like internal motivators of sort of like confidence or self-esteem or feelings of energy or feelings of vibrance and all the rest of it. And when we can dig into those factors, it's like you can then position the question, well, okay, it's not actually about that weight on the scale then, or even that particular figure. Because I had a client recently say to me, I look back at myself a couple of years ago and I would kill to look that way again. Yet
Hmm.
in that instance, I was dieting. I was trying
Oh
to lose
wow.
fat. I didn't feel good in myself. And so it's like, so is it actually that figure that you're wanting, or is it more of a, what do you think that figure or that body image entails for you? And I feel like it's more a feeling of confidence and energy and vibrance. And then you can get into the chat about, working on body image separately anyway.
Hmm.
But it's a case of um, helping them understand some more internal motivators over why starting to work towards a smaller body is the important thing for them, but while honoring the relationship with food. To go back to that original question you asked, we don't go through external controls and rigid rules and all the rest of it. It is very much a case of trying to build internal cues and action steps and habits around these steps that will help them toward them, because my clients don't struggle with their main meals. They struggle with the fact that they have snacking or binging habits, and
Hmm.
that comes from a place of restriction.
Yeah, a lot of my clients, they will be pretty normal throughout the day with meals, and then like later at night is when all hell breaks loose and all that sort of stuff. But I appreciate you saying the weight loss thing too, because I agree. Usually they say I just want to look better, I just need to get there, and it comes from a place of, well, when I get there, I'll feel this way, and that may be true, but I think it's really the thoughts you're thinking about that weight that make all the difference, and so you can get to the bottom of that, and maybe it is true, but it breaks my heart sometimes. Like someone the other day told me, if I could just lose 8 pounds, I would be happy. And I'm like, that's not necessarily true. Maybe you might be happier, but it's like why an 8 pound difference? That's not a crazy difference to make, right? So I'm glad that you called that out, or I'm glad that you said those reasons behind that. So when you're working with people who are struggling with the munching and the snacking and the binging, how do you help them, or what are the first few steps you use to get them to be more mindful with their food habits?
Great question, because a lot of this is so mindless, right? It's so
Hmm.
just automatic. Um, and the first thing I tell people is always that I want them to be completely like open and honest about when these situations occur, because only then can we start to like really dig deep into why they happen. Um, and what we use that break the chain exercise for them to start being aware of their triggers earlier in the day or earlier in the week that might be similar to those events over time. And then using just CBT based exercises like journals or even specific worksheets for these clients who have these behavior patterns can be really, really useful, because as soon as you stop to get a pen and paper out, it's like, how can you, there's nothing more being aware than that. Like even just
Hmm.
trying to type notes on your laptop, as you mentioned, you could be doing work on kind of one thing while also like looking at a YouTube video or watching TV in the background and kind of like typing out and not really paying
Yeah.
attention to anything. But if I ask you to get this, to get a journal out and a pen, and to answer questions, to specific questions of, okay, why, where's this feeling coming from? How can I rate this feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? What feeling am I feeling? Is it
Hmm.
hunger, or is it an emotion? And we give clients the feelings wheel to start to get better at emotional labeling and distinguishing sort of facts and feelings and emotions and all the rest of it. And you can start to think, okay, where's it coming from? How intense am I feeling this feeling? Is snacking right now going to be the thing that I want to do? You know, like, do I really want to eat this cookie now? Will I enjoy this cookie more or later? Is it because I'm actually bored or emotional or whatever? And then what's the best action for me? Like, is eating this cookie going to help me feel less lonely? Or
Right.
do I need to call a friend, or do I need to do an activity that's going to be good for my body?
Yeah,
Am I bored?
absolutely.
Do I need to go for a walk? Do I need to read a book? Do I need to explore an evening hobby, perhaps? Because every evening I find myself snacking, and actually it's
Yeah.
just because I'm bored.
Now, when you write things down, I think so many people, when they hear the word journaling, they roll their eyes. They're like, ugh.
Yeah,
And I've had so many clients that are like, I really am resistant to journaling and I like it, whatever. But I have found so much benefit from writing things down myself, even if it's not the specific feeling well, which I think is a great exercise. But even if you just do a thought dump of whatever's in your mind right now
yeah,
can be helpful. It doesn't,
yeah,
and I think journaling gets a bad rap because it's like this kumbaya. They think it has to be like meditative, spend an hour on a mountain with a goat
yeah.
journaling. It's like, no, it can be 5 minutes of writing down your thoughts, and stuff like that. It seems to work
Yeah,
very, very well.
it does. It does, because it's bringing your thoughts and feelings into awareness.
Hmm.
Whereas before they'll sit there in the clouds, and
Yeah. Well, and
you
it
know,
forces you to slow down because you can't write as fast as you think too.
no, and you can't type it, because like I'm a blitz typer so
Yeah, me too.
fast, but handwriting, my writing is terrible. But in terms of
Yeah.
legibility, I can read it, which is all that matters. But as you said, it's
Sometimes I
slow.
look at my handwriting and I worry about myself. I'm like, how did I
Yeah,
do this? And that my handwriting looks like that. But anyway,
it's like
continue.
it's like a 5-year-old kid's. But
Yeah.
the thing is that mindfulness also gets a bad rap.
Hmm.
But the act of being mindful, as you mentioned, is not sitting on a mountaintop with a yoga mat, listening to Kumbaya for several hours and saying
Hmm. Yeah.
and writing things down. As you said, a journal can be as simple as doing a brain dump. Like,
Hmm.
doing a journal before bed has massively helped a load of my clients sleep better, because it gets the
Right.
thoughts and feelings out of their head and onto paper, and then they're like, oh wow, I'm not worrying about all these things anymore. And
Mhm.
sitting down to meditate for 3 to 5 minutes every day has helped more of my clients become more mindful with their eating, because
Mhm.
they discover how to do a mind body scan, and they're like, oh right, okay, I am actually feeling X, Y, and Z. I didn't realize that before, because they hadn't actually ever slowed down to check in with their body. Every time they had a
Yeah.
5-minute break, let's make a cup of tea. So British. Let's make a cup of tea. Let's look at my phone. Let's watch a cat video on YouTube. It's not a case of, I've got a 5-minute break between meetings, why don't I meditate for 5 minutes?
Mhm.
How can I fill this blank space?
Yeah, I'm totally guilty of it too. I mean, I try to meditate sometimes, but I'll still find myself like, oh, let me just go check my phone really quickly, off a call, immediately do that. And it's like,
Yeah,
why? You're just staring at a screen for hours. You need to check in, but when you slow down, I think of it, the metaphor I think of often is, when you're in traffic, or you're driving and there's lots of things going around, it's really hard to think properly and someone asks you a question and you're just like, I need to
yeah,
concentrate on what's going on. And so
yeah,
to figure out what's going on, you need to pull over and slow down and check in, right?
yeah.
And I think that's a helpful thing because when you're going, you don't recognize everything that's happening because you're a human being that can only focus on so many things at one time.
Yes, and there's a funny meme about like dads driving being like, "Oh, do you all remember the time when your dad used to turn down the radio so they could see better?" And
Yeah.
but you're right in that, like, if there's
Hmm.
something else affecting a sense, you're kind of like, no, I need to pay attention to this, and this is distracting me. It's not the fact you can't see very well; it's numbing the distraction for you to pay attention to something important.
Yeah,
And
you need to think better.
yeah, and I use the app, the Headspace app, for my meditation, and they click up like little push notifications through the day. And one of them the other day was like, next time you go for a drive, try having like no music or radio on at all, and be
Ooh.
uber checked into your drive. And I was like,
Oh
I
gosh.
don't think I want to do that. Like
I
I'm
know,
driving
that sounds
15,
awful.
20 minutes at a time. Like I like my music. I like my jams, but it's an interesting exercise.
I wrote it down. I've heard of it. I haven't tried it yet, so I'll do that because it sounds
Might try it
uncomfortable.
tonight.
I would never want to drive here without music or anything like that. But
Yeah.
I'm sure, honestly, I would be a better driver if I didn't have any distractions. So,
Yeah, that's what I.
mhm. Well, when it comes to, so I have like a whole list of questions for you here.
All good.
But you've been super informative lately, or the whole time. Uh, I mean, obviously, you said the most common issue you see people struggling with is emotional eating, bingey type habits, that sort of stuff. The one thing that you were saying, you're talking about all these exercises, and they're all very helpful. But what do you say to those people who really think it's just them and they don't want to try any of those things? They feel like it's not going to work.
A really good question. Because resistance is a big part of coaching, right?
Mhm.
And I've done a lot of work in improving my coaching ability over the last couple of years, and one of which was like a lot of research into motivational interviewing. I don't know if you know of the coaching framework.
The MI coaching.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And their big piece is always like respecting the autonomy of the client, right? And obviously validating their experiences, their thoughts, their feelings, and not trying to push your agenda onto a client. And there was a big quote from one of my mentors that was like, client coach agenda like times a certain factor will equal like X amount of client resistance. So it's like whenever you try to force a client to do something, the more they'll push back at you, whether you think that's the right path for them or not. And so it's for me, it's open-ended questions are the light bulb for every client, because you want the client to be formulating their thoughts into words. And then if you can reflect those words back to them, even if it's just a direct reflection, a simple reflection of their exact words back to them, they can hear that and then think to themselves, okay, that doesn't sound right to me. Or you might then ask them a few open-ended questions and then say, why do you think that is? Or I'm really interested in why you have that opinion. And it's so important to do these over a call like you and I are having now, as opposed to by a message, because a message or an email, like, why do you think that, can be interpreted as such a well, you're wrong, you idiot.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas actually,
You read text messages, the tones can be so off. Like, why do
so
you
bad.
hate me? Yeah, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, I just was asking a question.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's like, if you interpret that question as a slight at any time, like, you'll lose the client. So it's got to be done with such sort of compassion and genuine interest as to why that they hold that belief, whether you believe it to be true or not.
Mhm.
And these clients may have tried so many different things and failed, which is why their self-efficacy is through the floor. And as you ask them, okay, what have you tried, and what kind of things worked, what kind of things didn't work, and why do you think you hold those beliefs? And you've got to kind of eventually win these clients over to pointing out their bright spots and their superpowers, the things that they've done well in their life, the things that they do well in their life right now, the things that they've achieved and how they've achieved them. Because over time, the more you can show these clients where they're successful and how those skills could cross over to helping them overcome these negative habits,
Mhm.
they'll start to open up to like new ways. But it's got to be client led. I never force a journal or a worksheet onto my client. It's very much a case of, if you're interested in hearing about it, I've got a worksheet that may help this situation. And then they
Right.
might say, oh, okay, tell me about it. And I'll say, right, the worksheet's this, and this is how it's done. Is this something that you might be interested in? And if they say
Mhm.
no, it's like, okay, well, I won't give it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I'm
won't
not,
force you to do
I'm,
it.
I'm not going to email it in a PS. Here's that worksheet. Just make sure it's
Mhm.
done by next week. We're not teachers giving homework.
Yeah, I sometimes like, well, we'll set a weekly goals for clients if they like that, but again, it's goals that they've come up with. So,
Yes.
because then if you sometimes you set assignments for people, and again, even if you're not working with a coach, if you start setting goals for yourself, they're important, but you start being like not maybe achieving those, then you start avoiding looking at those goals again. And the same thing if you're working with a coach, you'll start avoiding talking to that coach, being honest with them because you feel like you failed, whatever the stuff is.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky balance because sometimes it's hard as a coach because sometimes you know there are things that will work, and then clients can be really resistant to it, right? And so asking questions, kind of getting to the root of like, well, why don't you want to do this thing that maybe could be really beneficial to you, I think is a great way to go about it. And kind of, like you said, giving them their own autonomy, because at the end of the day, if you're pushing that on them, no one likes to be told what to do, even if it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and even if they've come to you for that advice and are paying you
Yeah.
for your services, it's like asking permission for that advice is always the best way to go about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I have some clients who they will come, they've never had coaching before, and they they think it's going to be me just telling them what to do, and actually I'm asking them a bunch of questions, and they're like, what is this? But then they find it really helpful because of the same thing you said. When you're forced to say those things out loud, you kind of hear maybe the errors in it or what doesn't really make sense, the non-consistent things or inconsistent things. So yeah. So let me ask you, completely switching gears here. Since I didn't ask you in the beginning, which is when I usually do, tell us a bit about you. How did your fitness journey start? And how's it going?
Going all right at the moment, to be fair.
Okay.
I joke about, for me, like I've not got any outlandish specific goals or anything like that. And for me, with my fitness, that works perfectly well because for me, it's just about staying healthy and being consistent with my training, which means I just need to enjoy it and make sure I set kind of a habit of going X amount a week at a certain time. And that's what keeps me going. Because if I'm too flexible with my schedule, I can put it off.
Hmm.
In terms of when I started, I was always a bigger bloke, and as such, I found myself not massively sporty as a kid. But then, as I got into my teenage years, I was encouraged to start a game called rugby union,
Hmm.
in England, and found that I was quite good at it because of my size, and because my dad had always played rugby when he was a kid, and my brother and I did play a lot of games together. So although I wasn't massively physically active, I had good coordination and all the rest of it. So I took to rugby really well and played that all through my teenage years and didn't really ever formally like go to the gym or anything until I hit university. Um, and fast forward a couple of years, I was introduced to CrossFit,
Okay.
and CrossFit I took to um like a duck to water, really. I enjoyed the competitive nature of it. I enjoyed the group nature of it, the camaraderie,
Yeah.
the community, particularly coming from rugby. That was what I'd enjoyed about team sports, the community aspect of it all, and the fun, as well as the competitive nature and the pushing yourself and all the rest of it. So I fell in love with it, really. I became absolutely obsessed. But with that, I entered a very sort of dark world of weight stigma and sort of body. It did become quite body dysmorphic for me because I was always perceived as the chubby guy, the bigger
Mm-hmm.
guy, and I struggled with those thoughts a lot as I got better at CrossFit and it even became my career. I became a full-time coach. I still felt like I was too fat,
That's
and
hard.
it was difficult, and I ended up hiring a nutrition coach to help because I'd done so many different diets by this point. I was 24 by this point. I'm 31 now, so it's quite a few years ago. And um I'd done so many different diets. I'd done meal plans, I'd done the paleo diet, I'd tried the zone diet, I tried doing just eating clean, whatever that means. I tried Whole30 and all the rest
Yeah.
of these things to no avail. And this nutrition coach I hired was an old rugby friend of mine who had been posting these before and after photos of people doing flexible dieting. And he won me over because of the whole, like, you can eat cereal and get lean. And I was like, that just sounds like magic to me. So I need to hear more about this magical
Yeah.
potion that this man is selling. And as such, I was entered into the world then of macro tracking,
Oh, okay.
and being very specific with protein, carbohydrates, and fats, because I was training twice a day, CrossFit training. I was walking about 25 to 30,000 steps every day because I was a CrossFit coach, coaching sort of 5 to 6 hours a day, living in London, which meant I had to, walk to the tube station, take the tube, get off the tube at the other end, walk to the gym, do all of my classes, do all of my training, walk about during the day to kind of get food and coffee and all the rest of it, and then walk back home and do that same journey.
Mm-hmm.
So on a fat loss diet, I was on like
Yeah.
3,300 calories or something obscenely high. So, from a guy who I worked out the calories that I was on from following like one of my stricter meal plans, and it was something like 2,000 or like 2,500. And I was
Oh my
losing weight on
goodness.
like 3,100, 3,300. So knowing what I know now, I was like, man, no wonder you were getting so tired through the week that led into such like horrific weekend binges, because that's what I was doing before. It was like
Oh,
eat
wow.
clean during the week, binge on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And
And that's
I
a thing a lot of people find, is that they can eat clean for a certain amount of time and then go crazy on the weekends or binge and then try to pick it back up again. Like it catches up
yeah,
to you.
vow to be good again on Monday. And it's like, that's the diet mentality I was talking to you about before. That's
Mm-hmm.
the restriction thing of like, oh, I'm trying to be good. And then you end up binging and trying again. And macros for me felt like I'd kind of overcome that. But what was interesting is that despite me starting to get much leaner and perform far better, I still was chasing numbers on the scale. And I was chasing like, I need to be 85 kilos. I need to be 85 kilos. I was like, no idea why I had this number in my head, but it was like, I need to be 85 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back at pictures of when I was competing in the British Championships of CrossFit. And there's a picture of me in a workout and I'm, really, really lean, really shredded. And during that weekend, I remember I was still on fat loss macros.
Wow.
And it's like a competition weekend.
For a
And
championship, yeah.
yeah, and I didn't do very well, and
Surprise.
felt pretty gutted about it. And I binged the evening of that final day of competition. Like went out to dinner with my friends, had like 2 main meals, had
Mm-hmm.
2 desserts, I think, and they were like, Johnny, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I've competed, I need the energy. And then like went home and had
Oh,
like bags of like chocolate and sweets and things like that. And it's like, oh
oh,
man,
that's so sad.
yeah, like
I
really
feel for
horrific.
that younger Johnny. That sucks.
And it's funny because I thought macros had kind of like helped me find a balance, but then years later, as I was analyzing that period, because after I stopped macros, I put a fair bit of body fat back on, and I was like, yeah, macros for me had just become another diet. And then when I wasn't tracking or I went a little bit over, I felt like a failure, and then that would lead to a binge. And it was like, yeah, it's just compensatory behavior. And it's, as we spoke about the other week, when I look back at those behaviors, I can recognize the bulimia that I had of like trying to exercise my food all the time. Like
Right.
I'd be like, oh, I need to do X amount of steps because I need to earn the macros that I'm going to eat, or I've only trained once today, I need to do another training session because otherwise I'll put body fat on. Or
Mm-hmm.
and then the body dysmorphia I had of still trying to lose weight despite being really, really lean. And
Yeah.
I look back at the smaller body I had then, and I know that I'm much happier now in all aspects of my life. So it's like I don't need to chase that weight or that figure. And so it's interesting taking it back to that conversation we had of like, oh, I'll be happy if I weigh X. Like I can 100% tell you now that won't be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you wanted to get to that point, it seemed like you'd have to sacrifice a lot. Why do you, I think a lot of people listening, they might hear that and think, oh my God, like he's just given up or something. But why do you think you are happier now, even though you don't maybe have that shredded lean look?
Well, because so that for me was back in 2014, 2015. 2015, it was July 2015. So it was just after my 25th birthday was that competition. I think it was actually the weekend of my 25th birthday.
Oh,
And
wow.
we were
Okay.
out for my 25th birthday. That was what the meal was, which was another reason to treat myself. And when I started looking more into nutrition coaching myself, because that was what started my journey into this world of nutrition coaching versus CrossFit coaching. And I started reading up about, I mean, for years, I was still a macro coach for people, providing people with macros and doing flexible dieting and still kind of trusting a lot in that, despite having seen my own exit out of that world. I still believed that was the best way for people to lose fat because that's what had worked for me, despite it obviously in the end not working for me. And it wasn't until I started doing a lot more in the psychology of eating habits and behavior change that I started to recognize the disordered eating habits of my younger self, look at why they happened, and then think, oh, wow, that's quite interesting. And to answer your question about why do I feel like I'm happier now, my life back then was so focused on these external goals I had of reaching a certain weight or being of a certain physique or reaching a certain CrossFit position in the competitions, that there was no balance to my life whatsoever. Like, I was training all the time. I was working in the mornings and the evenings of a gym, which meant I was literally spending all of my day in a gym. And then on a weekend, what would I do? I'd be training or prepping my food. And it's like, I wouldn't drink alcohol. I wouldn't really go out with my friends or my girlfriend of the time. I mean, there was a time my girlfriend at the time wanted to take me out for a meal or something, like as a treat, and I was like, no, I can't because I've got no macros left.
Oh, right. Yeah. Just missing.
Like,
Your
just
world was so
missing
much
out.
smaller, it sounds.
And I had no like other hobbies outside of work or the gym and like
Right.
anything else to live for or anything. And I had such a lack of self-compassion for myself as well, in that if I didn't hit my macros, I felt like a failure. If I didn't do my training sessions, I felt like a failure. If I had a bad day training, why aren't I better at CrossFit? Like, I was just so hard on myself all the time. And I was for years, actually. It was only that, as I said last year, when I was doing the sort of coaching certification that I'm redoing now, when we had a whole module on self-compassion, I was able to see how low in self-compassion I was and how that had led to quite dark mental health days for myself. And through cultivating a better self-compassionate practice, looking more mindfully, doing more journaling, and then creating a more well-rounded life where I have internal motivation to exercise, yes, but my worth isn't based on me hitting external goals. And I also have this hugely well-rounded life of friends, family, hobbies, and all the rest of it. Like, I've got so much more about me than CrossFit. Whereas that Jonny, the only thing that Jonny had was CrossFit. And that, I mean, to be fair, I've only just sort of thought about this now. That might have been because I had a kind of failed musical theatre career. And then I'd used CrossFit to kind of replace it. It's, I've only just sort of made that connection. So there's a lot of things there as well.
When my eating disorder started, so I struggled with an eating disorder in high school briefly, and then also in my early 20s, and both of them became an issue when I had transitioned to a different thing. Like, I had lost kind of my friend group, and I was in a different new location and didn't know anyone, and so both those times the eating disorder became something that was very comforting and structural to me. It became my identity. And like you like you, I didn't really make that connection until much later when I had to explain it to someone. I'm like, oh, right. I mean, that makes sense. There was a huge transitional period.
Yeah, it is crazy, that, isn't it? And I don't feel like people give that enough credence, in that although we're taught in the act of mindfulness that impermanence is like the only common denominator of life, is that everything always changes. Big things like moving house or moving job or losing certain things or whatever, losing friendship groups or losing someone in your life, like, there's such big shifts in your life and identity that they can create really big imbalances that if you don't work through and address at the time, like if you're not mentally self-aware that that's a change you're going through, it can create really big shifts in patterns for people that they're not happy with.
Yeah, and you can get swept away with it pretty quickly without realizing it. And
Yeah.
I think also when you are isolated, it can be 10 times worse, which in both my situations, I was very isolated. And so you, unless you have people around you, sometimes you can't see what you're doing, like, and how maybe disordered or not okay it really is, or how not normal it is. But thank you for sharing the fitness journey with us, because like I think a lot of people can relate, and I'm sorry that you struggled with that, obviously, but at the same time, it brought you here, and now you're helping people
Yeah.
through it. So I
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
look at, my own journey. I'm like, it was painful. I wish my younger self didn't have to go through it, but at the same time, it's part of life. And now we can both pass on our knowledge to other people.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it obviously was difficult, but it's not without cause. And
Yeah.
yeah, you're able to overcome those things, aren't you? And then learn from it. And if that helps other people as well, then it's a good thing.
Yeah. So one last question I'd like to ask you before we end off the podcast, you've been great, is what would you say to someone out there listening who is struggling? You could say anything else in case we missed it, to someone who's struggling with binge eating or disordered eating and feels kind of hopeless. What would you say to them?
I would remind them of that need for self-compassion, because when we're going through those sorts of situations, it can be very easy to berate ourselves and ask why we're going through this when other people don't. Why am I struggling with this when other people make it look so easy to not have these issues? Why am I so broken, or why am I so stupid, or why am I so unmotivated or lazy, or just, insert negative self-comment here.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that you can catch yourself berating yourself, the more that you can create awareness over your lack of self-compassion, and then you can start to create more positive self-talk. And there's a really big difference between positive affirmations that are kind of like airy fairy statements of like, oh, I am the best person in the world, and I
Yeah.
earn £10,000 a second, and all of these other things.
Right.
Versus positive self-talk is like, you root positive self-talk within fact.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you've got a good job, or you've got great friends, or how would your parents view you, how would your friends view you, what would they say about you? They'd say very positive things about your character and your abilities. And if you can collect a bunch of these and recite them to yourself regularly, you can start to cultivate this better self-talk. And I get a lot of my clients to use this thought record sheet when they have negative self-talk around, what thought or feeling am I having? I feel like I'm a failure. How intense am I feeling this? Where has it come from? What would an alternative viewpoint be? And what would I tell a friend in the same situation? And that
Yeah.
thought process of what would I tell a friend in the same situation, that question in and of itself usually brings the client to a more compassionate answer that they can then replace that thought with, because we're so much more compassionate with other people than we are ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
funnily enough, that lack of self-compassion can lead to a lot of problematic behaviors down the line.
Absolutely. I think that what would you say to a friend who came to you in the same situation? I ask that question a lot too, because it's so much easier when you think about it outside yourself, and when you think about the other people you care about. And it's like, the way you're looking at those people, your friends are looking at you the same way, and you would not be treating a friend the way you're treating yourself. And you're right that, again, self-compassion, it sounds so cringy, sounds so like, ugh, but it is helpful if you're trying. I mean, you can push yourself to do a lot through hating yourself. You can, but it's a miserable experience. And so, and then you really feel
Yeah.
burnt out and awful and depressed. So I think trying to motivate yourself through kindness and positive affirmations, but things founded in facts, like you said, just a so much better mental experience. And you want the
Massively.
process to be enjoyable, not just the goals.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, right? Is that get your external, it's okay to have external goals, because like, it's great to have a destination. Like, if I'm going on a road trip, I want to know where I'm going, and that's
Yeah.
my external outcome. And then my internal, my action steps towards that goal will be like the route I plan to get there. Or like, am I going to drive? Am I going to take the train? Am I going to take the bus? Am I going to fly? That's your action, external action steps, which are within your control. because whether you reach that destination isn't necessarily in your control. You can get hit by another car, or your train could get cancelled, or bus breaks down, all the rest of it. But your internal motivation is your reason for wanting to go there in the first place. Like, I want to go to London because I want to enjoy some great shows or whatever. And with internal motivation, we can be like, I want to exercise because I enjoy exercise and I want to be the value of a healthy person. Great. Let's use that. And with this positive self-talk, there's a misconception around self-compassion, that self-compassion is about taking the easy route and letting yourself off the hook. And that's not what self-compassion is at all. Because actually, if that's the worst thing for you, that's not being self-compassionate. Being self-compassionate is doing the hard thing because that's what's right for you. It's doing the workout when you don't really want to, but you know that it's going to help you reach your goals, and you know that you'll feel better afterwards. So you go and do that workout because you've written it down. It's your action plan. Okay, it's different if you're like unwell, if you're physically sick,
right? You have boundaries
take the day off the gym. But if you just can't be bothered to get out of bed and it's a bit cold, it's like staying in bed isn't being self-compassionate. Going to the gym is. So it's like we need to understand the difference between self-compassion and what's letting yourself off the hook. And for your listeners,
that's an excellent way to phrase it, I think, because people, they do think it's the easy way out. And I've said it in a different way, which is like, doing the hard thing is sometimes an act of love, which sounds a lot more woo, but it really is an act of love for yourself to get yourself to the gym when you're feeling like you just can't be bothered, like you just can't. You're going to thank yourself later for doing something like that. So you're right, it is sometimes doing the hard thing, self-compassion.
Exactly. And there's a website, self-compassion.org, that goes into a lot of what self-compassion actually is. And there's even then a test that you can take that will give you a self-compassion score. And then there are resources there that will help you develop more self-compassion based on the score that you receive as well.
Wow. Thank you for the resource. I'm sure, I know like tons of people are just like writing it down right now. I just did. So I'll check that out. Okay. Cool. Well, you've been an amazing wealth of information, and it's been excellent talking with you. Thank you for being on the podcast. Where can people find you?
Well, thank you so much for your kind words and for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. And for people to find out more about me, the best place is just on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at Jonny Landels, which is JONNYLANDELS. Of course, you can direct them to the correct link in the show notes, I'm sure.
Yeah, they will be in the show notes for sure.
So that's the best place.
Your company is called Next Step Nutrition, right?
Yes. So nextstepnutrition.co.uk. We've got some helpful blogs and stuff on there if you like to read. I've got a podcast known as Next Step Espresso. So people can check that one out as well if they want to listen.
It has
some
over
more.
700 episodes. I saw that today and I was like, what on earth is going on here? It's crazy. And they're all bite-sized bits. Not all of them. Some of them are like 40 minutes, but a lot of them are just quick 5 to 6 minutes of very direct advice and help. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a Monday to Thursday, so like a 5 to 10 minute shot. And then the Friday I usually have a guest on. Sometimes I'm not as organized, but I'm making a pact that every Friday this year we'll have a guest on. I've sorted myself out.
Good for you. Yeah, I try to every other Friday have a guest on the podcast. Sometimes if I'm not being on it, then it doesn't happen, but I totally understand.
Yeah, you get it.
All right. Thank you, Jonny, for being on. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Yeah, of course.